Attention human, prepare yourself for the Double Pipcast.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Cam from the Double Pipcast, and you are joining us for episode 11 and interview number 2 with Drew Nolosco from Wizards of the Coast.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back on the show. How are you guys doing?
I am sure that was a resounding great from everybody listening asynchronously. Hey, Drew, first off, thank you for joining, and I also wanted to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to reveal cards for Siege 2, the defensive configuration card, which looks crazy.
Yeah, it was, we thought you guys did a great job. Very happy to give you a preview, and, thank you for helping getting the words out on the new cards.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so for this interview, last time we did a kind of a dive into your industry experience, how you came to be a part of the Transformers trading card game, with your background in working on animated licenses and their transition to card games. So a lot of great feedback on that. And if you haven't listened to it already, make sure you go back and listen to episode 6 for the first interview with Drew. A great interview. I listened to it on my. I still listen to it just because I feel like the content was so cool and so rich. This time, I wanted to jump into some more pointed content on what we have coming up with probably your slowest season, right?
It's an extremely lazy season. We got out the lounge chairs in the office, and we're all just basking in the Seattle gloom.
Obviously, it's the exact flip side of that going into Q4 here. You've got the wrap-up of the 2019 competitive season, War for Cybertron trilogy. We got the second one coming out here first week in November, right, with Siege 2.
Yep.
Yeah, so yep. a lot going on.
This is November 8th. We're very excited. And then shortly thereafter, we've got the Energon Invitational at PAX Unplugged. So both of those are those are our biggest swings towards for 2019. And there's been a lot of work both on our end and on the Hasbro Transformers team's end and on the community's end to get ready for these events.
Yeah. So speaking of preparing for something like what we've got coming up here in December, PAX Unplugged, how does that look to be fleshing out in terms of what your presence will be there? And I know Pastimes is working with you to handle the competitive side, but how does that look to be fleshing out?
It's looking great. We're working out those final details. So at the time that we are doing this interview, a loyal fan group, we are verifying all of the data from the Energon Invitational qualifier season. So a really interesting tidbit is that the Transformers TCG competitive play brought back a lot of players who had not played in a DCI-sanctioned event in some time, and brought in a lot of new players who had never played in a DCI-sanctioned event. We saw a lot of new player generate additions to the DCI. So that's really awesome. And what that means is we have to go and make sure that all of those accounts have correct data, and that especially the accounts that haven't been where players haven't played in a long time are migrated over to the current system correctly and verified that data before we start sending out confirmations of invites. This doesn't mean that there's any problem with anyone. It just means that there's a higher number of older accounts that we have to migrate, and that's what we're doing this week. We haven't encountered any issues. We're just crunching through that data. So very shortly, people will start to receive notifications from Wizards regarding their invite. So if you want an event, just to double down on not alarming people, if you want an event, you're qualified, and you'll get a message from Wizards sometime in the next couple of weeks indicating, hey, everything's all copacetic and ready to go. So that's where we're going on the invite side. In terms of actual plans, as you noted, Cam, we're chugging away with Pastimes games. In addition to the main event, we are also prepping with Pastimes the full roster of other Transformers events for those who are not playing in the main event. So we've got a really big and busy weekend full of Transformers play. across multiple different formats. If you want to play constructed or limited or league or draft, we've got an event for you, as well as the main event itself. I'm going to be there. I will be there to say hi to everyone, just like a Gen Con. Matt Tabak will be joining me, and then probably one or two other Wizards folks from the Transformers team will be coming as well. So basically, everything's working out really nicely. We still have a couple of cool things to announce in terms of prizes. If you remember back to our original announcement, way back at the beginning of the year, we mentioned that there's two lines on the prize list that are not very specific. There's Transformers TCG product and toys, and we'll be talking about that not here, but relatively soon. And those are very exciting items. So far so good. I'm really excited.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a big spectacle, and this is, not to underplay it, this is the first big competitive event that is basically putting a pin on the first year of competitive Transformers trading card game. You were talking about the DCI data and crunching that data, and you talked about not old players necessarily in age, but players that have had DCI cards for a long time. They're veterans of trading card games, and they are returning for the first time in registered play for Transformers. So my first question is, were the original DCI cards actually wooden nickels with the numbers burnt in?
So it's funny. My boss, Charlie Catino, I believe had at the time before migration, like a 3-digit or 4-digit DCI number. I mean, all the original DCI numbers were 4-digit, but some of them were like 00 something. And I know the guy who has DCI number 0001. So I know what that original DCI card looks like. It was not a wooden nickel, despite the persistent rumor that they handed out wooden nickels. No, we've had so many players who have engaged with Wizards products over the 26-ish plus years that we've been making trading card games, and not just Magic. We used to make a lot of different other trading card games in the past, and we've seen some of those players return to play Transformers, which is really exciting. So it's been very, very cool watching this community coalesce over the past year and a half, and I think you put it really well. This is the premier event for the year. It's the capstone. It puts a pin in it, and I will say that I'm really excited as we continue the Siege 2 releases, watching people talk about how they can use the new cards from Siege 2 in their metagame. And how they can. There were just a bunch of cool deck ideas that people were bandying about today with the new Battlemaster who was released who was shown off in the last couple of days. So I think we're going to see a big shake-up to the metagame, and I'm really excited to see what the top deck brewers come up with.
Yeah, and typically in a situation like this where maybe 4 or 5 weeks from the release of the game to the actual competition, folks will be able to, it'll be tournament legal. So that's cool that there's no whitelist time or blacklist time where we're not allowed to use those cards. So that is cool.
So Transformers, as soon as a product is released, on the day of release, the product is legal for sanctioned play. So with that month period between November 8th release of Siege 2, or just under a month, and the Energon Invitational, that's a great time for players to go and play weekly Transformers at their local game store. They can earn participation prizes, or with the just recently shown off golden promo cards for Wave 2. We've got Runabout, Runamuck, and
Roadhugger.
Roadhugger, yes. We did that because they form a pretty fun 25-point Decepticon card team. So we know that many stores do 3 weeks of play, and you come back each week, and you can get one of the different cards. So 3 weeks of play leads right into the Energon Invitational. So it's a group. We really put that program together so that we could release. You could have some in-store play where you could brew and practice for the Energon Invitational, and then you could head off to Philadelphia.
Yeah, I saw them coined the Runna Bros online.
Yeah, I saw that too. You know, it's a fun fact that we had seen some people playing Runabout and Runamuck were designed to replicate the sort of combat synergy that those two characters have in the various iterations of the Transformers universe. And Roadhugger's a nice little addition and lets you sort of maximize our centric cards. So it's a fun deck, and I think the golden promos are beautiful. The Decepticon colored ones, I think in particular, look gorgeous. So
yeah, I think the gold shows up on the text in a very primo way.
Yeah, that purple and gold just looks astonishing on the Flame War. So I'm really happy with all Decepticon promos. Plus, Decepticon fans get a nice little bump there with some bling. So I think it'll be a good time.
Yeah, definitely. So with we're talking about the capstone kind of winding down. January is a great great month to make resolutions. Is there anything that you're looking at and the team is looking at in terms of tweaking anything for the next competitive run?
So I don't think we can fully discuss that until we've gotten through the actual invitational event itself. I can say that for certain, one thing that we're going to do with future in-store play kits is be a lot louder in the community of the player community, as well as the store owner and retailer community, as to the start and end period of the sign up for that kit. So what I hope is that when we are much louder about that and saying, hey, and by louder I mean being very definitive, hey, this period for signing up a kit is going to be blah to blah, and then when that starts, letting know in the community groups, hey, talk to your store to get them to order a kit, because we want all the players who are building communities in their local stores to have this promo kit available to support that in-store play. That's what it's for, and you need to sign up for it in enough time for us to make the right number and ship them out worldwide. So we're going to help people sign up during the appropriate time period by being really, really obvious about it. Much more obvious than we were for the past two kits.
Well, hey, I'm sure they'll appreciate that, whether they know it or not. And we definitely appreciate that as well. Any signal boosting on your end is great.
Yep. As to, and I don't think that was the answer you were looking for, but it's an important one for us because in-store play is sort of the bedrock that we build Transformers on. But I think what you were asking me is, are we going to change the format of EIQs? Are we going to? The answer is we need to see how the entire program performs and how the community reacts to it. And is it successful from the player's point of view? Is it successful from retailers' point of view? Is it successful from sales? From driving sales point of view? So far, so good. But let's revisit this after the Energon Invitational is complete and we've all had some time to digest.
Of course. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I know there was some speak of how the Energon Invitational is going to pan out. And I definitely am looking forward to seeing how that works, kind of shake up in terms of conventional play.
Hey, I'm going to see you there, right, Cam?
I am going to be there, but I'll probably be playing at the kiddies table.
Hey, I'm happy that you're going to be there. I'd love to do. Let's do a follow-up interview. Hey, let's plan ahead. Let's do a follow-up interview at the Energon Invitational. Do an in-person one.
For sure, and we'll have to make sure that there's minimal loudspeaker announcements during the.
You know, I really like PAX Unplugged. It's a relatively new convention, but the organizers are doing an awesome job at the convention. I've seen strong improvement, already good convention, but strong improvement on things like logistics and layout from year to year. And I'm really looking forward to not just not just Transformers, that I love that, but also PAX Unplugged is brings together a lot of. I'm originally from the East Coast, so I get to see a lot of East Coast tabletop game friends there. So I'm super, super excited. I really can't wait for PAX Unplugged. Between now and PAX Unplugged, we still have a couple of cards up our sleeve. There's going to be at least one thing to knock the socks off the community. That's going to have a fun little impact too at the Energon Invitational, and John will be talking about that over the course of the next several weeks. I don't have a date to tell you when this cool announcement will be, but get ready for something awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you've been whetting the appetites, you and everybody on your side, with some of the things that have been released that we'll get into. So now all I see is, what about this guy? What about this guy? What about the bullet train combiner?
Matt Smith wrote an article today about the design philosophy behind Mercenaries, which was probably one of the biggest announcements of Siege 2, because it doesn't just impact the Transformers trading card game; it's part of the larger Transformers generation brands. And we have known about this for ages, right? And it's something we've been working with Hasbro on for quite some time, and a long time ago, I sort of whetted people's appetite by saying, hey, in Siege 2, both sides get pretty desperate. And Mercenaries are one of those desperation measures. Getting forces who fight for Energon as opposed to for the ideological reasons that Autobots and Decepticons are waging war for the control over Cybertron is a pretty last resort, particularly for the Autobot side. And putting that together with Hasbro was very exciting. Matt did an amazing amount of heavy lifting. And one of the things that I want to particularly point out is in Siege 1, we did a number of characters got a little bit of redesign work to particularly if they were like G1 toys, like the Firecons that hadn't gotten facelifts in a long time. And I want to point out that Octone's truck and plane mode facelift into Cybertronian truck and plane was one of the most exciting things that I've done in terms of character redesign. I love the plane mode for Octone, Mercenary Octone. That whole thing was really exciting to work on.
That's awesome. So everything down to the insignia was all released for the first time with those reveals. That's
correct. Yeah, and that is the brand. That's not just that insignia. That new faction icon is not just for the TCG. That is the Mercenary faction icon for Transformers.
That's really cool to be basically the first thing out of the gate with that.
Yeah, it really is. And some of the characters who are Mercenaries in Siege 2, some of them were Autobots and Decepticons in the past of the War for Cybertron storyline, and some of them may be Autobots or Decepticons again in the future parts, the unrevealed parts of the War for Cybertron storyline. Allegiances shift during war, but at this point, at the end of Siege, which interjection, Siege is part 1 of the War for Cybertron trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much content, we divided it into 2 parts. So Siege is part 1, Earthrise is part 2, and part 3 hasn't been announced yet.
I got it. I'm on the same page now.
Awesome. Yeah, and so that plus Triptychon, Siege 2 brings a ton to the Transformers TCG metagame, and I'm really interested to see what the player R&D end of this ecosystem churns up.
I agree. And you don't know until it gets out there. I mean, people are already trying to theory craft, but there's something about having the tactile cards in your hand and maybe using the companion app to really do those imputations. But
Yep. And also, there's still a number of Siege 2 cards yet to be revealed.
Right.
Including something that I don't think people are expecting and falls into the category of weapons of last resort.
That's something to chew on and maybe go through and think about what that could be. But I'm sure we won't have to wait too much longer because we only have a little bit of time left, even though it seems like forever.
Yeah, we're pushing through really hard for the card reveal season, and you and the other community members have been doing a fantastic job at spreading the word, starting the analysis on the new cards. The community is, I see the brain power furiously working. There was a really exciting discussion in the fan communities in the past couple of days. I'm just going to go reference it. But there was some brewing over a really cool deck idea that's using Shockwave,
Fireflight, and yes, another one. I think Joe from Wreck and Rule is using it.
Yeah, it's here we go. It's Caliburst, Shockwave, Fix It, and System Reboot. This is the one. Sorry, I know the one you're talking about. This is the one I was thinking of. There's a lot of people. It's a little bit of there's a lot of cards in this combo, but it does some really awesome things when it gets going. I don't know if this is the best thing or the worst thing or the middle thing, but it's an exciting thing. And I'm really happy to see people brewing the level that they're brewing. It really makes us at the creator end really happy to see people taking the puzzle pieces that we put out there and fitting them together in cool combinations.
Yeah, that's the thing that always I'm like, man, I wonder if this was intended, and sometimes it's not, and sometimes it just seems so obvious. It's almost like they're meant to be together, like two cards made at two different times, but maybe they were meant to be together.
So we definitely do a lot of that. There are cards that specifically we've made to work with cards from older sets, and there are cards that we make that don't look quite powerful enough, and people are like, oh, this is just a card for a sealed deck, or there have to be bad commons sometimes, and we know we know multiple sets in the future, and we know what that card becomes later on.
Yeah, so with that in mind, we talked about the not spoiler season, but the reveal season, and it's been intense. I think one day there was 10 cards revealed by 10 different people.
Yep. That was a little. That was the first or second day of reveal season, and then we had 15 or so mercenary and mercenary weighted cards on Thursday and Friday.
It was. I don't think there can be too much of a good thing though.
I agree with you.
So I know one card comes to mind when I think about what's probably the most maybe pushing the envelope in terms of the design pillar that you spoke of previously, pushing the envelope and making sure that it's happening for a purpose, obviously. Yep. But is there any battle card or character card that comes to mind from this wave that's really embodies that?
So in terms of pushing the design envelope, there are a couple of cards that push into some interesting spaces that we really haven't played in with before. Lord Megatron's sort of alt win condition is definitely one of them. And I think Megatron is super interesting because very technically, you don't have to do any damage with your characters for Lord Megatron to win you the game, right? That's unlikely, but he creates a character-based alt win condition by dealing damage to your characters based
when they cycle their deck, right?
Cycling the deck. And in some cases, that's just punishment, right? Like, Megatron gets some free damage in because everybody's going to cycle their deck at some point or other. And there are also possibilities of maximizing that potential and having Megatron be your win con, because his tank side asks you to stack defense a lot, and Megatron can become very, very beefy. So he's one of them, and it's really because of that alternate way to win. And then there are a couple of battle cards that play in that very same space. Overwhelming Firepower is one of them. It's this weird quest that you have to go on to get it to work, but then it does insane amounts of damage, KOing most characters. Is it competitive? Probably not right now. Maybe in the future, but it certainly is an interesting space for people and deck brewers and people who like to build combo style decks to play around in. So I'm really happy with that. And then one of the things that I am very happy about that touches on new design space, but also touches on how the player community reacts to new design space is how secret actions are maturing in terms of the way players are looking at the value of secret actions and how they can potentially use them in a variety of types of decks. And there are some very, very interesting secret actions in Siege 2 that really give a lot of interesting flexibility. Stuff like jam signals. There are some other situational hosers that if played at the correct time, really can turn the tide. So these are the kinds of pushing design space that we like, that we're really happy with.
That's
what are your particular ones?
So Overwhelming Advantage was the one that came to mind to me as well, because I'm a fan of Blowpipe. Yes. And as soon as I saw the rainbow of colors in that body of text, I was like, oh man. Although it may not, like you said, it's not the fastest card. You have to, like you said, go on this grand conquest to find or get all these cards onto one character. But if you hit with it, I mean, all you need to do is hit once, hopefully.
Yep. There's definitely a theme in Siege 2 of supporting decks that are not all blue or all orange. There's some support for multicolored decks. There's some support for white pip decks, and there's some support for pipless decks. Pipless decks are clearly difficult to assemble correctly, but we put some strong nods in for there, so people who want to use those tools and find the best possibilities can. So
pipless deck would be like diving into the deep end of the pool. Like you just have to do it and try it, and
right. And so we have some cards that support pipless cards, and also there are some pipless cards that are pipless because they're otherwise very strong, like Blast Suit.
Yeah, and then there's the new it's basically escape route with no conditions. Rollover or showing off. Showing off.
Yes. Yep. Showing off has a lot of powerful potential if your deck can handle the fact that it doesn't contribute during combat. I think there's a very interesting argument that I'm watching from Metroplex players as to whether or not it is worth reducing your chances of hitting Metroplexes. We just call them ultimates. Mm-hmm. Hitting that correct combinations to trigger his attack ability, or whether being able to get an entirely new, another layer of flipping in is worth it. And I think jury's out in the public right now, and playtesting will play it out for them. But that kind of stuff are interesting decisions and trade-offs that we want players to have to make. A question that we get asked a lot is, oh, you made this amazing card for orange decks, but it has a blue pip. Or this card has 2 orange pips on it, but it really supports a defensive deck. What's going on? If we made cards that were... Sorry, we can make cards that are like that. That are aggressive cards that have 2 orange pips. They would cost 1 or 2 stars. Right? Like, if you double dip on both parts of a card, you need to pay for it for that card to be balanced and fair. So
right, there has to be an opportunity cost, otherwise it's a no-brainer.
Exactly. And for many cards, the opportunity cost is that the pips don't necessarily match what you want to do. They're usually useful, right? Flipping orange is generally good on offense, and flipping blue is generally good on defense. So there's always times where those pips will be helpful in combat, but they may not be your deck's primary purpose. And we want players to have to evaluate these cards and figure out, oh, where is this best used?
So power sword and body armor come to mind when you
Yes.
say that. Just
exactly, perfect examples.
So, you talked last time we spoke, and even this time. There's this lore, and I don't know if it's persistent throughout the toy line, the Siege toy line, and what you're doing here with the cards, but it sounds very rich. It sounds like it helps you shape the card art, what the card's abilities are, who's going to be appearing in the game. Is there anywhere for consumers to consume that story, or is it kind of just locked in the design process?
So there will be. You may have heard that there was announced a little while ago a War for Cybertron Netflix show, and that when that comes out, that will be the primary story vehicle for War for Cybertron.
That's awesome. I had no idea.
Yep. The trading card game in Siege really has two places inside the overall storyline. First, we show things that don't make it into the toy line, as well as things that make it into the toy line. So particularly characters, right? Like we show characters that the toy line couldn't print, make as many toys as we can make characters because we print cards as opposed to mold plastic toys. And then secondly, we show cool little vignettes that are not necessarily narrative. Like, we show that time where Ironhide, I'm thinking of Guarded Posture here, where Ironhide, desperately picked up the shell of another character and used it as a shield, etc., etc. Trypticon is probably the biggest part of this, of that. So it has really been exciting to work with Hasbro on where we fit inside this part of the narrative. And I'm really happy that fans are, in this set in particular, seeing the little tiny mini storylines that we put in the art, like the time that Octone was hired to infiltrate the Autobots and take over Hot Rod's group of fighters, which is Contingency Contract, Coup, and a third card whose name is escaping me right now.
I know which one you're talking about. I think I saw it the other day, and in that call out and putting that together.
Yep, that is distinctly a very tiny little 3-card story told in art and card titles. That is one very small part of the Siege universe. There's a whole bunch of there's another story that's being told with some off-road patrol characters, and some of the cards have been shown, some of them haven't, but when people put them together, I think it's a funny little story.
Awesome. Yeah, I liked Detour and Roadhugger, so I'll have to look out for that when I'm cracking packs. So kind of on a different tangent here. separate from the story, separate from the spoiler season, but more focused on the new mechanics that have been announced with Siege 2. And this kind of goes hand in hand with an article that Ken Nagel wrote not too long ago, Complexity Creep. So you've got mercenaries, you've got Triptychon, the safeguard keyword, the bounty keyword, two-part weaponizers. Is there anything that you have to do in order to skirt that line when designing new keywords and then keeping folks engaged?
Yeah, there is. So safeguard is probably, in terms of new mechanical space, definitely occupy some of that. But the overall, instead of doing, so we think of complexity as tall and wide. Tall is complex, a single concept that is actually very complex. Here's a great example. In Wave 1, everything was new, but Pierce was the single source of major complexity amongst keywords, right? Pierce is actually somewhat complicated to explain, even though it's relatively simple in what it does. We consider new pips to be fairly large sources of complexity because of the sort of myriad implications of what you can do with it, including things that you can paths that you can go down. For example, diluting the total number of orange and black pips in your deck, and orange and blue pips in your deck by adding too many of another pip color. Those are our tall sources of complexity. With Siege 2, we instead went a little wide. We added a bunch of things, none of which are really super complex, right? Like weaponizers build on battle masters. They have a really neat twist to it, but it's not an all new concept that one has to wrap their mind around. Safeguard is not a super complex ability. It basically does what it says. The implications of it are very interesting, and especially there's some better than average healing cards in this set, particularly among the mercenary cards like Detritus. And Safeguard and healing do some very interesting things together. So there is work that the players can put in to find how to best use the cards, but the concepts aren't that difficult. Right. Triple changers are not a new thing, but we did play around with what triple changers do a little bit in this set. So we have to skirt what I guess this is a roundabout way of saying we consider it to be a sort of total amount of complexity that can either go few difficult things that are rough to wrap your head around, or a lot of little things, none of which are super complex, and once you grok them, you're like, oh, I got it, I can move on to the next one. And Siege 2, we feel, definitely falls in that latter category.
Right, and going with the wide methodology, it really just means that you have to keep more things in mind prior to playing, and then once you're in a match, you look at what's in front of you and deal with that.
Yep. One of the ways that we evaluate whether something is tall complexity or wide complexity is how much of the card's in-game effect is understandable if you read the card and literally do as it says. Safeguard, for example, when you include its reminder text, it literally works exactly as it says, and there's extremely few corner cases to discuss. Pierce, not that way, right? Like lots of explanation for people required in order for them to understand what it does, and it requires you to understand a bunch of other things like how attack and defense interact at more extreme levels. And I want to take this opportunity, speaking to the fans, whether you are yourself new to the game or if you are a fan who is introducing the game to others, one of the things that I always recommend is when you're tell players is take Transformers cards literally. 98% of the time, if you do exactly as the card says and no more and no less, the card will play properly. We try really hard to minimize the amount of off-card rules that players need to understand. And the way we write cards is incredibly specific. So, here's an example. The card Quartermaster can pull. It's a modal card. It has two options, and one of the things that it does is it allows you to bring a Battle Master back from the KO area in play, right? That does not mean it can bring a Weaponizer back.
Right. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't a typo.
Yep, exactly. And Weaponizers and Battle Masters are different things. That's the kind of literalness that we use when we are spending actually a ton of time editing the card text and typesetting it. Anyway, I've been reminding that to players, particularly players and community members who have loud voices like yours. And I mean loud voices that speak loud. I mean you have an audience, and you help amplify messages.
So, in that same breath, almost. So the teaching of the rules. There's a lot of different ways that even Wizards of the Coast, and this comes to mind. Or I associate this with Wizards of the Coast mostly. Is that opening of a product feeling and learning the game, whether it was the original 1996 Pokemon starter box that came with everything you needed, or any other product that I've bought in the past, and then you knew what to do right out of the box. I recommend to anybody listening to also send those folks to the website with there's a lot of production value in your how to play videos.
Yeah, thanks.
But what I'm getting at is there any room, or do you feel there's any space to add more inside of the packs? Printing rules on the whiteboard that comes in boosters, adding, remove, and add suggestions from the designers into theme decks, like Wizards used to.
So, with regard to the white card stock that we in packs that protect the cards, we're actually printing. You saw this in Siege 1. You'll see it again in Siege 2. We're actually printing pointing at other parts of the Transformers universe that talk about Siege, like we did for the toy line. Mm-hmm. Our friends at IDW have been an enormous support for us, particularly when we were getting started with amazing art from very talented artists. So you'll see an advertisement on one of those for an IDW product that's coming up.
Very cool.
So we've got a use for them. But the second point you made is being more obvious with players about how to improve decks. And there, we've already taken one, what we think is important step is you'll notice that in our articles from designers, we're including more and more deck lists, not just suggestions, but we're actually including full deck lists, showing people how they can use the new cards that we're talking about. And that is something that when you next see deck products, which will be, sometime towards...
At some point,
right? That is something we're strongly considering for entry-level deck products, mm-hmm. as well as more advanced products, but particularly for entry-level products. And then the other thing that when you eventually see decks again, is we're going to be a lot louder as to whether this deck is a starter product or a more competitive deck. And
Right.
I think I've mentioned this a lot about Metroplex, but Blaster versus Soundwave I think was something that we could have been clearer on as well. Like the Blaster and Soundwave deck, and particularly the Blaster deck, are much more competitive right out of the box than any starter product. And they're not really meant for people completely new to trading card games. They're a great entry point for people with lots of trading card game experience who have come from other games. And we're going to be louder about how we talk about that for new deck products.
That's awesome.
So it's a good idea and something that we also recognize that we can improve on.
Please don't. You'll probably give me a heart attack if you say you're bringing back the beginner, advanced, and expert badges on the back of the product.
No, we're not that.
90s are in, right?
No, not that part of the 90s.
Why are these booster packs for experts?
Yeah.
Oh man. Is there anything else about Siege 2 that you think we haven't covered that needs to be known?
I think I'm going to let the remaining card previews talk about that.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool. Well, go ahead.
I'm trying to bite my tongue a lot right now so I don't steal other people's thunder.
It's okay.
Okay. I'm just gonna say there are some awesome previews still to come, and stay tuned.
Okay. Hopefully none of world-ending proportions.
No, Cybertron still exists at the end of Siege.
Okay. Neighboring planets too?
I don't know if anyone's ever said whether there are neighboring planets or not around Cybertron in this version of the story.
Okay. So I had a couple of grab bag questions for you that really pull in from other things that kind of involve the Transformers trading card game Wizards of the Coast by proxy. Redemption and recycling programs. I know Hasbro is moving to rattan packaging at some point, I think by 2010. Is there
2020.
any sort 2020? Okay, I was going to say 2010 was 9 years ago.
Yeah, continuing through the early 2020s, yes.
Yep.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. I thank you for bringing me back into the present. I must have left my DeLorean.
I mean, I know I did.
What is your experience with running Rapper Redemptions, either as a bystander and seeing them happen? Do you have any experience with that?
So, Rapper Redemptions, as in turning 100 rappers to get something cool?
Correct.
They are a logistical nightmare.
You don't like 100 rappers on your desk times a million?
So, right, like Rapper is just generally, Rapper Redemptions are more time consuming and generate less customer response than you'd expect. For some very, very highly motivated people, it's an awesome thing, but it doesn't really inspire the outcome or any of the outcomes that we'd really want at the levels that justify it. In other words, the rate of return on it is pretty big. I find to be pretty bad. So you probably won't see Rapper Redemptions. But starting with Siege 1, you'll note that underneath the fin seal on the back of each booster, the fin seal is the part that you can sort of like lift up, if anyone has never heard that term. We have the recycling information for the booster and its contents printed using the relatively new international standard for recycling information. So every player will be able to see which parts of our products are recyclable as we continue the march towards greater sustainability.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. And yeah, I mean, Rapper Redemption seemed like a ploy that was trapped in time. I know I participated in one, I think for Score, maybe many moons ago.
Years ago.
And I think nowadays you could probably get the same thing with a code or some sort of QR code or something like that and have kind of the same idea with none of the logistical nightmare that you're talking about of putting them in an envelope and sending them in and waiting for the promotional product. And
I think that's exactly it. I think we leverage digital codes to achieve similar effect with less mess for everybody involved. And honestly, depending on what region of the world you live in, the wrappers for Transformers TCG may already be recyclable.
Right.
Multi-poly plastic is recyclable in many communities in the United States and Canada, for example. And as every community has different capabilities for recycling, it's worth just checking probably the flyer that your local sanitation or recycling department puts out. But if the tiles match up or the symbology matches up on our pack or any Wizards product in your local recycling, hey, just stick it in the recycling bin.
Yeah, this is a call to action for everybody on launch day. Somebody who's paying attention to this, bring in a recycling bin for all of the wrappers for your product if you're not going to keep them for sentimental reasons, and don't put them in the same bin as your Cheetos or Mountain Dew bags like we did for the last one.
If your community is able to recycle that type of plastic.
Yes, otherwise then it will be your problem at that building. And then, we're getting close here to the hour point. Do you have a minute for some yes or no quick fire questions from the fans?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here we go. And if you want to expound on them, feel free. But otherwise, I'm going to let her rip. More win conditions.
Yes.
Do you err? Go ahead.
But not too much, yes.
Okay. Do you err on conservative or liberal with card tags and attributes like fire cons?
That's a neither yes or no. It has to fit both the character's role inside of Transformers and also the needs from a game design and mechanical point in the TCG. I will say that while we're generally pretty happy with the amount, we call them traits in the office,
Okay.
with the amount of traits and the number of traits and who gets what trait, I acknowledge that we could do a little bit more with some mismatches between art and the melee or range tag that happen late in the design and development process, and that's one thing that I would love to correct. But I also want to point out that putting too many traits on a character is actively bad because it increases the amount of things you have to remember about the character all the time.
Like a spaceship guardian tank ranged character?
If you're talking about the Omega Supreme promo that we did, if there's one character in play, or a character like Omega Supreme who basically says you can have one or two characters, where we can be a little bit more liberal with tags.
Right.
But stuff like the Micromaster Patrols are pushing it in terms of characters and tags.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Okay.
That was yes or no.
Yes.
Let's next one.
Will there be set rotations?
That is something. So it is probable that there will be set rotation at some point in the future, but it is extremely unlikely for that to happen in the next 8 months.
Right.
So
due to how fresh it is still.
Yeah, exactly. We're still very early in the life cycle of Transformers. In order to keep trading card games healthy, rotation is a very, very strong and important tool in keeping a trading card game metagame healthy and fresh, and letting new players come in, join over time. So I would say It's probable that there will be rotation at some time, but I don't think you have to worry about it in the near future or mid future.
Okay. If there is a change with rights as it concerns trademark and registered names, will temporary names like Scrapnel and Octone stick?
We have no control or input over the names of Transformers characters.
Okay. Are there plans to make in-store play more appealing in terms of the release boxes, such as full art battle cards?
So, I would love to dive into this one more with the fan who sent this in, because in general the feedback that we get is that for now the gold foil promos and the mechanically unique release weekend promo are pretty motivating, and as long as we see the strong majority of players getting really excited about those, then we know that it's at the appropriate level of incentive.
Right.
Different sets and different theme sets, right? Like may suggest different themes of promo, and we'll do what's appropriate for the set from a theme and from a metagame point of view. In terms of just constantly upping the ante, that's unsustainable and really just doesn't work for anyone in the really long run, even though it sounds really, really cool in the short run.
Oh, so, yeah.
Right? Like, yeah. We could give away gold bars as incentives. And
but last time you gave me gold bars. Exactly.
Then you go to platinum, and then suddenly you're getting into the radioactive portions of the periodic table, and no one's happy, right? Like, this incentive has a half-life of 2 days. You better come release weekend.
Oh, man.
But what I will say is there are a lot of awesome ways to bling out cards. Mm-hmm. There's awesome ways to bling out cars too. And you heard part of my Brooklyn accent there. And we love blinging out cards, and we'll be doing cool bling out on various cards in various ways in the future. And I hope you're excited by the things that we will show you over the next months. So let the player community let us know if these are awesome. If they're awesome, we'll keep doing it. If there are other awesome things that to incentivize players and make our product more special, we'll look at that too.
Awesome. Yeah, I can only imagine, and anything you can do to make the cards, even though they are eye candy already, anything else that can be done, like you said, blinging them out, is a plus.
I think I got time for one more, Cam.
Yep, this is the last one. It was basically a million character questions. Lugnut, Refractor, Rail Racer. I know what the answer is, but yes, more characters down the line.
Yes, more characters down the line. I will actually address one of those. We are all really sad, perhaps Matt and I the most, that we were not able to cram Reflector or the Gen Selects version of Reflector into Siege.
Yes. Okay. And we'll pour one out for Reflector, and then we will wrap up. Go ahead.
He might be Refractor these days.
Yes.
I think he actually is Refractor.
Yes.
It has been awesome talking with you as it was before. I look forward to seeing you at the Energon Invitational, Cam, and I will let's get a game in and chat some more.
Yes, for sure. Thank you very much, and thank you all for listening.
Cool. Bye, guys.